What happens when Hollywood's most beloved action legend sits down for what should have been a law stakes? Daytime interview only to walk straight into the most volatile on-air confrontation the View has ever seen? Today, we're breaking down the moment that stunned millions watching live, and ended with one of television's most outspoken hosts storming off her own set in total humiliation. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts below, because this one gets wild. The energy inside. The View studio was its usual mix of chatter and anticipation as cameras finished their countdown. At the table, Joy Behar shuffled her notes with that familiar smirk she wore whenever she thought she had guessed exactly where she wanted them. The day's big interview. Harrison Ford, booked to promote his latest film appearance, producers expected to be smooth, easy, and entirely uncontroversial. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the legendary Harrison Ford. Whoopi Goldberg announced as the audience erupted. Ford walked out with that effortless, rugged confidence, offering a quick wave before settling into his seat. His half-smile charming audiences for nearly half a century was firmly in place. Harrison, welcome back, Sarah N. said warmly. Always a pleasure having you. Thanks for having me, Ford replied in that gravelly, unmistakable voice. Though I'll admit, I'm always a little nervous sitting at this table. You ladies have a reputation for tough questions. The audience laughed briefly, because Joy Behar was already leaning forward, eyes gleaming. Speaking of tough questions, she began. Let's talk about your recent comments on environmental activism. You're vocal about climate change, yet you own multiple aircraft and fly them regularly. Isn't that a little hypocritical? Ford's smile dimmed just a fraction. His jaw tightened. Well, Joy, that's a fair question, he said. But the situation's more complicated than you're framing it. I use my aircraft for conservation work, transporting researchers and supplies into remote areas for environmental monitoring. Not exactly weekend joyrides. Oh, please, Joy scoffed, waving him off. That's what every wealthy celebrity says when someone calls them out. You mean to tell me Harrison Ford, with all that money and influence, can't find greener ways to support conservation? The temperature in the studio dropped. Sunny Hostin shifted in her seat. Alyssa Farah Griffin shot a wary glance toward producers off camera. This was no longer playful. Ford sat up straighter, voice turning cool steel. Joy, I've been doing conservation work for over 3 decades. I've funded projects, boots on the ground, not just press releases. And sometimes that means getting to places commercial flights don't reach. But I do appreciate your concern for my carbon footprint. Concern? Joy barked out a harsh laugh. I'm not concerned I'm calling you out. You Hollywood types lecture everyone about the planet while living in mansions and jet-setting across the world. It's pure virtue signaling. Dead silence. Even Whoopi, usually quick to jump in, kept her eyes fixed on the table. Ford's expression hardened when he spoke. His voice carried the weight of someone who dealt with decades of noise and didn't mind cutting through it. I think you've confused me with someone else. Joy, I don't live in a mansion. I live on a ranch in Wyoming, where I do real conservation work. I don't fly jets for fun, they're tools for the job. And what I don't do is show up on television to attack people I've never met based on assumptions you haven't bothered to verify. Joy's cheeks flushed red, but instead of retreating, she pushed harder. I've been in this business longer than most people have been alive, Harrison. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and what I'm talking about is hypocrisy. No, Ford said quietly. The entire studio froze. What you're talking about is making assumptions and attacking someone based on those assumptions. That's not journalism. That's just mean-spirited. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Joy's mouth opened, then shut again.
Ow.
Stunned that anyone, let alone Harrison Ford, had called her out so bluntly, the other hosts sank into their chairs. Wishing they could disappear? Mean-spirited? Joy finally sputtered. I'm asking legitimate questions about environmental responsibility. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't come on talk shows. Ford leaned back, studying her with the same unblinking intensity he once leveled at villains on archaeological digs. I can handle tough questions just fine, Joy, he said. What I have trouble with is rudeness dressed up as journalism. There's a difference between asking hard questions and being deliberately hostile. Hostile. Joy's voice jumped an octave. You think I'm being hostile? I'm being real. I'm being honest, something this town doesn't see enough of. I'm being real, Ford repeated, tasting the words like something sour. Is that what you call interrupting your guest? Making accusations without facts? Acting like you've got a personal grudge against someone you've never even met? The audience was riveted. No laughter, no chatter. Just the sound of 1,000 collective heartbeats waiting for the next blow. Joy's face had shifted from red to a dangerous shade of purple, her fists tightening on the table. I don't have a grudge against you, she hissed. I have a problem with celebrities who think they can lecture everyone else while living completely different lives. And I have a problem, Ford answered calmly, with talk show hosts who mistake attacking their guests for entertainment. Silence so heavy it felt physical settled over the studio. You could have heard a pin drop. Joy's eyes flashed. When she spoke again, her voice dripped venom. Attack. You think this is an attack? You clearly don't know what real journalism looks like, Harrison. Maybe Hollywood has spoiled you. Maybe you're used to everyone kissing your feet and telling you how wonderful you are. Ford's brows lifted, and for a split second, something like amusement flickered across his face. Joy. I've done interviews for over 40 years. I know the difference between a journalist asking tough questions and someone who's just looking for a fight. And right now, you're looking for a fight. I'm looking for honesty, Joy snapped, her voice climbing higher. Something that's in short supply when celebrities come on these shows. You want to talk about your conservation work? Fine. Let's talk about the fuel consumption of those aircraft you love flying around. Joy Whoopi Goldberg tried to intervene, eyes wide with warning. Maybe we should know. Joy cut her off without even a glance. I'm not done. She swung back to Ford like a predator spotting movement. Harrison, how much fuel does one of your aircraft burn in a single flight? Do you even know? Do you even care? Ford regarded her quietly before answering. A Cessna 180 burns about 12 gallons an hour. If you want specifics, my larger aircraft used for long conservation missions burns more. But it also carries equipment and personnel who otherwise wouldn't reach those remote areas at all. A beat. But something tells me you're not actually interested in the details. Oh, I'm very interested, Joy sneered. 12 gallons an hour. That's more than most people use in their cars in a week. And yet, you're here lecturing people about their environmental impact? I'm not lecturing anyone, Ford replied evenly. I work with conservation groups. I fund research. And yes, sometimes the work requires transportation. But I'm curious, Joy, what's your environmental footprint? How did you get to work today? The question hit her like a slap. That's not the point, she stammered. I'm not the one going around giving speeches about climate change. Actually, Ford said, a small smile tugging at his mouth, that's exactly the point. You're criticizing me for something you haven't taken the time to understand, while admitting you don't hold yourself to the same standard. That sounds like the real hypocrisy here. Joy's face twisted with fury. Don't you dare turn this around on me. I'm not pretending to be some environmental saint while burning through fossil fuel like there's no tomorrow. Environmental saint, Ford repeated calmly. Joy, I have never claimed to be perfect. I've never claimed to be a saint. I care about conservation, and I contribute my time and money to support it. But you seem intent on turning the tools I use into proof that I'm some kind of villain. Tools. She snapped. That's what you call? Joy let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Is that what we're calling private aircraft now? Tools? A saw is a tool, Ford replied patiently. A hammer is a tool. A vehicle is a tool. An aircraft is a tool. They're all just devices that help you accomplish a task. The question is whether the task is worth the cost. In my case, the work I do has helped preserve hundreds of thousands of acres of wilderness and protect countless species. He shrugged lightly. I'm comfortable with that math. I'm comfortable with that math, Joy echoed in a mocking sing-song. How convenient. I bet you're comfortable with a lot of things when you can afford to be. The other hosts exchanged alarmed glances. Sarah N. fidgeted with her cards. Sonny Hostin stared hard at the table, and even Whoopi looked completely at a loss at Joy's unraveling composure. "You know what, Joy?" Ford said, and for the first time, a crack appeared in his patience. "I came here to talk about a movie. To have a conversation with intelligent people about work I care about. I didn't come here to be ambushed by someone who seems to have a personal vendetta against anyone who actually tries to make a difference." Vendetta. Joy's voice pitched unevenly. "You think this is personal?" "This isn't personal. This is principle. This is about calling out the hypocrisy running rampant through Hollywood." "No," Ford said, firm now. "This is personal. This is you taking whatever frustrations you're carrying and unloading them on someone who's done nothing to deserve it. Frankly, it's beneath the dignity of this show and everyone at this table." The camera caught at the precise moment Joy's composure shattered. Her face drained too white, then surged back to red, then turned ghostly again. "How dare you," she whispered, voice trembling with fury. "How dare you walk into my workplace and lecture me about dignity? You don't know me. You don't know what I've accomplished. You don't know anything about what I've done for this industry." "You're right," Ford replied evenly. "I don't know you personally, but I know what I've seen today. And what I've seen is someone who invites a guest on their show and spends the entire time trying to humiliate him. That's not the behavior of someone who cares about this industry or this show." Joy shot to her feet so abruptly, her chair slammed backward into the set piece. "That's it?" she snapped, her voice booming so loudly it echoed. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this from some washed-up action star who thinks he's better than everyone else." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Ford didn't move, but his expression hardened, sharpened. "Washed up?" he repeated slowly. "Well, that's certainly professional. Professional." Joy practically screamed, gesticulating wildly now, all on-air composure obliterated. "You want professional?" "Professional would be admitting you're a hypocrite instead of pretending. You're some kind of environmental hero while you burn through more fuel in a month than most people use in a year." Joy, Whoopi tried again, urgency in her tone. "Maybe you should, maybe I should. What?" Joy wheeled on her. "Sit here and let this guy insult me on my own show? Pretend everything's fine while he talks down to me like I'm some amateur?" Ford finally stood, towering over the table. "No one is talking down to you, Joy. But if you can't have a civil conversation with your guests, maybe you should reconsider whether this is the right job for you." The words hit her like a punch. Her face cycled through shock, rage, humiliation, and finally something close to panic. When she found her voice, it erupted as a jagged screech that made several audience members recoil. "Reconsider whether this is the right job for me?" she screamed. "I've been doing this job since before you even knew what a talk show was. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners. I don't need some aging movie star telling me how to do my job." Ford's calm became almost unnerving next to her unraveling fury. "Then maybe you should start acting like someone who's interviewed presidents," he said. Instead of someone having a public meltdown on live television. The studio exploded into chaos. Joy's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out, tonally ragged, sputtering sounds. The other hosts looked mortified. Sarah N. covered her face with both hands, and Sonny Hostin stared wide at her colleague's unraveling composure. "Public meltdown," Joy finally croaked. "Public meltdown. You think this is a meltdown?" She let out a jagged laugh. "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, buddy." She leaned forward, eyes blazing. "You come on here with your holier-than-thou attitude, acting like some kind of saint because you fly around in your little airplanes pretending to save the world." "Joy, please." Whoopi tried one last time, but Joy snapped before she could finish. "No, Whoopi." She didn't even glance at her co-host. Her entire focus was locked on Ford. This man needs to hear exactly what. I think about his fake environmental activism and his condescending attitude. She jabbed a finger at him. "You want the truth, Harrison? I think you're a fraud. I think your whole conservation act is just a publicity stunt to make yourself feel better about your privileged lifestyle." Ford tilted his head slightly, studying her as though she were some rare, volatile specimen behind glass. "You know what's interesting, Joy?" he said calmly. "No. In all this ranting, you haven't asked me a single question about the actual work I do." "I won." You haven't shown the slightest interest in learning about the organizations I support or the projects I've funded. You've just made assumption after assumption based entirely on your own prejudices. Prejudices. Joy's voice shot into a pitch so sharp it made several audience members flinch. Ah! My prejudices. You're the one who came in here, acting too good to answer legitimate questions about your hypocrisy. I answered every question you asked, Ford replied quietly. I gave you specific numbers. I explained the work. I tried to have a conversation. You weren't interested in any of it. You just needed someone to attack. And I happened to be sitting in the guest chair. Joy's whole body trembled in outrage, panic, or something deeper that even she couldn't hide. You think you're so smart, don't you? She hissed. You think you can come in here and make me look bad on my own show? Joy, Ford said softly, almost gently. You're making yourself look bad. I'm just sitting here trying to talk. That did it. Joy released a sound that was part scream, part sob. She pointed a shaking finger at him. Don't have to take this. Not from some washed-up has-been who thinks he's better than everyone else just because he can afford to play environmental warrior. Joy, Whoopi said urgently, rising to her feet. Maybe we should take a break. No. Joy cut her off with a vicious slash of her hand. No break. I'm done. The studio froze. I'm done with this interview. Done with this disrespectful guest. And I'm done with this show. The last word echoed through the silent studio. You're done with the show? Sarah asked in a tiny, trembling voice. Yes, Joy announced, voice rising into full manic clarity. I quit. I'm not going to sit here and be treated like this on my own program. If this is the kind of guest we're booking it, this is the kind of respect I get after decades in this business, then I'm out. She ripped off her microphone with shaking hands. The shrieking feedback blasted through the studio, making people wince. You can find yourself another host, she said to no one in particular. Someone who's willing to put up with arrogant celebrities who come on here and humiliate the people who made them famous. Joy, please, Whoopi begged. Don't do this. Let's just nothing, Joy barked. She slammed the microphone onto the table with a clatter that echoed like a gunshot. I'm done. Out. 30 years in this business, and this is what I get. Disrespect from some guy who thinks flying around in airplanes makes him an environmentalist. Ford finally spoke, his voice steady as bedrock. Joy, I never disrespected you. I disagreed with you. I defended myself when you attacked me, but I never disrespected you. If you can't tell the difference, then maybe this really isn't the right job for you. The words hit her like a physical strike. She swayed for a moment, pale, trembling, eyes glassy. Then, without another sound, she turned and walked off the set. Her footsteps echoed across the stunned studio as the cameras kept rolling. The remaining hosts sat frozen in place. Ford slowly lowered himself back into his chair, smoothing his jacket as if this were all routine. Well, Whoopi whispered after several long seconds, this is live television for you. Ford looked directly into the camera. Weathered face was calm, steady, grounded. I want to apologize to the viewers for what just happened. It wasn't my intention. I came here to talk about my work and clear up some misconceptions. I hope people will look into conservation efforts around the world instead of getting caught up in personality conflicts. Sarah nodded weakly. Thank you for staying professional through all of that, Harrison, sometimes Ford said with a faint, tired smile. The most professional thing you can do is tell the truth and let people decide for themselves what they've just seen. And that is how one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history ended, with Harrison Ford sitting calmly at the view table. While Joy Behar's career imploded in real time before millions of stunned viewers,